At 69, she didn't lose her husband. She lost the life she thought was hers. Abandoned without warning, she returned to an old, forgotten house, never imagining that behind its silent walls, someone had been waiting for her for over 40 years. The door didn't slam. It didn't even make a sound loud enough to echo through the walls. It just closed, quietly, almost politely, like nothing important had happened. But for Meera, that soft click felt louder than any storm she had ever lived through. She stood in the middle of the living room, her hands still resting on the back of a chair, as if her body hadn't yet understood what her ears just heard. "Take care of yourself, Meera." Those were his last words. No anger, no regret, no explanation. Just a sentence that felt like it belonged to strangers, not to a man she had spent 42 years with. For a few seconds she didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door, waiting. Maybe he would come back. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe this was one of those moments where life pauses and corrects itself. But the silence that followed didn't feel temporary. It stretched, slowly, heavily, filling every corner of the room until it became unbearable. The tea on the table was still warm. She had made it just the way he liked, light sugar, extra milk. It had become a habit so natural that she no longer thought about it. Every morning, every evening for decades, without fail, without question. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the cup. She stared at it for a long moment, as if it might explain something to her. Then, quietly, she placed it back down. "Baz A's high," she whispered under her breath. The walls didn't answer. They had witnessed too much over the years: laughter, arguments, celebrations, long silences. But today, even they seemed unsure how to respond. Meera slowly walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last, like her feet were resisting the truth waiting on the other side. When she finally reached it, she didn't open it. She just placed her palm against the wood, feeling the cold surface press back against her skin. 42 years. It wasn't just time. It was a lifetime of routines, compromises, shared spaces, and unspoken understandings. It was learning how to read someone's silence, knowing what they needed without asking, adjusting your world to fit theirs until you forget where you end and they begin. And now, just like that, it was over. She turned away from the door and looked around the room. Everything was still in its place. The sofa where they used to sit together in the evenings. The small crack in the wall he had promised to fix but never did. The clock ticking steadily, as if time hadn't just shattered into pieces. "How can everything look the same," she murmured, "when nothing is the same?" Her eyes fell on a photo frame placed on the shelf. It was an old picture, faded at the edges, taken years ago. They were both younger, standing close, smiling at something outside the frame. She walked over and picked it up. "Were we ever really this happy?" she asked softly, her thumb brushing over the glass. Memories began to surface, not in order, not clearly, but in fragments. A laugh here, a disagreement there. Long nights of silence that she had convinced herself were normal. Moments when she felt unseen but chose not to say anything. Times when she adjusted, compromised, stayed quiet, because that's what she believed marriage required. "Maybe I should have asked more questions," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But what questions, and when?" When he stopped sharing his thoughts. When his answers became shorter. When his presence started to feel distant, even when he was sitting right next to her. Or maybe she had noticed everything. Maybe she just chose not to see it. Because seeing it would mean accepting that something was breaking, and she wasn't ready for that. A sudden wave of exhaustion hit her. She sat down slowly, holding the photo tightly in her hands. Her body felt heavy, but her mind refused to rest. Thoughts kept circling, questions without answers, moments replaying themselves over and over again. "Did I miss something?" she asked the empty room. "Yeah, you just wanted to leave." There was no anger in her voice, just confusion, a deep, aching confusion that made everything feel unreal. She had imagined many things about growing old. Quiet evenings, maybe some laughter, occasional visits from family, shared memories that would make the days feel full. She had imagined companionship, not perfect, not always easy, but present. She had never imagined this. Being left behind. Not because of a fight. Not because of something that exploded. But because of something that faded slowly, quietly, until it disappeared completely. Her grip on the photo loosened, and it slipped slightly in her hands. She quickly held onto it again, as if letting go of it would mean letting go of everything it represented. 42 years, she repeated, her voice cracking for the first time. A tear formed in her eye, but she blinked it away. Not yet. She wasn't ready to cry. Crying would make it real, and a part of her was still hopping, still believing that this was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he would come back tomorrow. Maybe this wasn't the end. But deep down, somewhere she didn't want to reach, she already knew. The silence wasn't temporary. It was permanent. She placed the photo back on the shelf carefully, almost respectfully, like she was putting away a part of her life. Then she stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Her movements were slow, mechanical, as if her body was running on habit while her mind struggled to catch up. She opened a cabinet, then closed it again. She didn't remember why she had come there. Everything felt unfamiliar, even though she had lived in this space for years. Abkaya, she whispered. The question hung in the air, unanswered. What do you do when the person you built your life around simply walks away? What do you hold on to when the center of your world disappears without warning? She leaned against the counter, her hands gripping the edge tightly. For the first time since the door closed, her shoulders began to shake. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free, silently at first, then all at once. But even in that moment, even as her world collapsed around her, there was something else buried beneath the pain. A strange, unfamiliar feeling. Not relief, not yet. But something close to it. Something she couldn't name. As if somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice was asking, "Who are you?" Without him the call came in the late afternoon, just as the sunlight began to soften against the walls. Meera was sitting by the window, her hands resting quietly in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The house still felt unfamiliar in its silence, as if it was waiting for a voice that no longer belonged there. Her phone vibrated gently on the table beside her. She glanced at the screen. Ali calling. For a moment she hesitated, then she picked it up. "Assalamu alaikum, Ami." His voice carried warmth, but there was something else too, concern, maybe even urgency. "Walaikum assalam," she replied softly. "Ami, I talked to Abu. He said you're alone now. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Meera looked down at her hands. "Kaya batati beta," she said quietly. "Kuch batin samajan main wakt lagta hai." There was a pause on the other end. "Ami, please listen to me. You shouldn't stay there alone. Come live with us. The kids miss you and Sana would love to have you around. You don't have to go through this by yourself." His words were sincere, loving, exactly what a son should say. And yet, something inside her didn't move. She turned her head slightly, looking around the room again. The same furniture, the same walls, the same life that no longer felt like hers. "I know you mean well," she replied gently, "but I think I need some time." "Time for what, Ami?" he asked, confusion creeping into his voice. She didn't answer immediately, because the truth was she didn't fully know. "I just don't feel like I belong here anymore." Another pause. "Then all the more reason to come here," Ali insisted, his voice softening. "You belong with us." Meera closed her eyes for a moment. Belonging. Such a simple word, and yet it felt so distant. "I'll think about it," she said finally. But even as she said it, she knew she would. After the call ended, the silence returned, heavier than before. But this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was pushing her towards something she had been avoiding. She stood up slowly and walked toward the bedroom. The cupboard door creaked as she opened it, revealing rows of neatly folded clothes, arranged the same way they had been for years. Her hand brushed over a few saris, then stopped. There was a small suitcase tucked away at the bottom. Old, slightly worn, but still intact. She pulled it out and placed it on the bed. For a long moment, she just stared at it. "Main kahan jarahay hun," she whispered, almost to herself. And then quietly, almost instinctively, she began to pack. Not everything. Just a few essentials, a couple of saris, some personal belongings, things that felt like they still belonged to her, not to the life she was leaving behind. Each item she picked up carried a memory, some warm, some heavy, but she didn't linger on them, not this time. Because this wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go. By evening, the suitcase was ready. She took one last look around the apartment. There was no dramatic goodbye, no tears this time, just a long, steady gaze as if she was acknowledging everything that had been and everything that no longer was. "Kuda Hafiz," she said softly. And then she left. The journey to the old suburban house wasn't long, but it felt like crossing into another life. The city noise slowly faded as the streets became quieter, narrower, more familiar in a distant way. She hadn't been there in years. Not since she stopped needing to. Or maybe stopped allowing herself to. When the rickshaw finally stopped, Meera looked up. The house stood exactly where she had left it. A little older now, a little more worn, but still standing. Just like her. The gate made the same creaking sound as she pushed it open. "Abhitak thik nahi karwia," she murmured, a faint smile appearing on her lips. There was something comforting about that. The idea that not everything had changed. She walked slowly toward the front door, her footsteps echoing softly in the quiet surroundings. For a moment, she hesitated. This house wasn't just a place. It was a chapter she had closed long ago. A version of herself she had left behind. "Shayad wakt agiyahai," she whispered. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old key. Her fingers traced its edges, remembering. Then, with a deep breath, she inserted it into the lock. It turned with slight resistance. But it opened. The door creaked as she pushed it inward, and a faint smell of dust and time greeted her. Sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating particles in the air, making the space feel almost suspended between past and present. She stepped inside. Every corner held a memory. Not loud, not overwhelming. Just present. The walls, slightly faded, still carried the same color. The floor, worn in places, still felt familiar beneath her feet. She walked slowly through the rooms, her eyes scanning everything. "This used to be the living room," she said softly, though there was no one to hear. Her voice sounded different here. Lighter, as if it belonged. She moved toward the window and pushed it open. Fresh air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from outside. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in days, her chest didn't feel tight. There was no pressure here. No expectations. No roles to play. Just space. Space to think. Space to feel. Space to exist. She placed her suitcase in the corner and sat down on an old chair. It creaked slightly under her weight, but held steady. "Main wapas gay," she whispered. The words felt strange, but right. This wasn't just a return to a place. It was a return to herself. Not the version shaped by years of compromise and silence, but the one that existed before all that. The one who had dreams, questions, and a voice she had slowly buried over time. She looked around once more, her gaze softer now. "This house still remembers me," she said quietly. And maybe she was ready to remember herself too. The first night in the old house didn't feel like relief. It felt unfamiliar in a way she hadn't expected. Meera had imagined peace, maybe even comfort, but what she found instead was a silence that felt alive, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. She spread a thin bedsheet over the old wooden bed and sat down slowly. The mattress dipped slightly under her weight, releasing a faint smell of age and dust. It wasn't unpleasant, just old, like a memory that hadn't been touched in years. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. The faint rustling of leaves slipped in through the half-open window, blending with the distant barking of a dog somewhere far down the street. "Yahan sab kuch kitna shant hai," she murmured. But the quiet didn't settle her. It wrapped around her, tight and watchful. She lay down, pulling her shawl closer around her shoulders. Her eyes stayed open, fixed on the ceiling. The fan above her was still, its blades frozen in time. She hadn't turned it on yet. Somehow, the stillness felt safer than the noise. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time moved differently here. Every small sound seemed louder than it should be. The faint creak of wood, the shifting of air, the distant hum of the night. And then, thud! Meera's eyes snapped open. She held her breath. The sound wasn't loud, but it was clear, definite. Something had moved. She pushed herself up slowly, her heart beginning to beat faster. "Koi hai," she called out, her voice steady but low. No answer. She listened carefully. Nothing. Just silence again, but this time it felt different, thicker. "Shayed Meera waham hai," she whispered, trying to calm herself. She lay back down, forcing her eyes closed. But her body refused to relax. A few seconds later. Scrape. This time the sound was sharper, closer. She sat up again, more quickly now. "No ya was sach main hai," she said under her breath. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the bedsheet. Her mind began to race. Could it be an animal, a stray cat, or maybe something had fallen? But the house had been locked for years. Hadn't it? She swung her feet to the floor, the cool surface sending a slight chill through her body. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she reached for her shawl and wrapped it tightly around herself. "Darna nahai hai," she whispered, more like a reminder than reassurance. Step by step, she moved toward the door. Each footstep echoed softly in the stillness, making her feel more aware of her own presence than anything else. The hallway stretched out ahead of her, dimly lit by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through a distant window. She paused, listened. Nothing. And yet something felt off. Her gaze shifted toward the far end of the hallway. The storage room. The door was slightly open. Her breath caught. "I'm sure I closed it," she murmured. She hadn't even entered that room since arriving. It was the one space she had avoided, almost instinctively, as if some part of her wasn't ready to face whatever it held. But now it seemed to be calling her. Another soft sound came from inside. Not loud, not aggressive. Just there. Her heart began to pound harder, each beat echoing in her ears. "This is foolish," she whispered, though her feet were already moving. She walked slowly toward the door, her hand brushing lightly against the wall for support. The closer she got, the colder the air felt, as if the room was holding onto something the rest of the house had let go. She stopped just outside the doorway. The gap was narrow, but enough to see shadows inside. Everything was still. Covered shapes, old furniture, forgotten belongings hidden under white sheets. Nothing unusual. And yet that feeling remained. She reached out and pushed the door gently. It creaked open with a long, drawn-out sound that seemed too loud for the quiet night. She stepped inside. The air smelled heavier here, dust, wood, time. Her eyes scanned the room carefully. Old trunks lined the walls, A broken chair rested in one corner. A stack of boxes sat untouched, their edges worn and softened by years. "Deka kuch nahi hai," she whispered, almost trying to convince herself. She took another step forward. And then she saw it. In the center of the room. A wooden box. Not covered, not hidden. Placed deliberately, as if it had been set there recently. Her brows furrowed. "Yapale yahan nahi tha," she said quietly. She was sure of it. Even though she hadn't entered this room before, something about it felt out of place. Everything else in the room looked forgotten. This didn't. Her feet moved toward it slowly, cautiously. Each step felt heavier, as if the air itself was resisting her. She stopped just in front of the box. It wasn't large, simple in design, but its surface was clean compared to everything else around it. Almost untouched by time. Her hand hovered above it. For a moment she hesitated. "Shayed kisi ni rakahoga," she murmured, though the thought didn't make sense. Who would come here? And why? Her fingers trembled slightly as she finally placed her hand on the lid. It was cool to the touch. She swallowed. Then slowly, she lifted it. The hinges creaked softly as the lid opened, revealing its contents piece by piece. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Just paper. Old paper. Stacked neatly, tied together with a faded ribbon. Her hand moved closer, almost drawn to it. She picked up the bundle carefully. The pages felt delicate, worn at the edges, as if they had been handled many times but never opened. Her eyes caught something written on the top page. A name. Her name. Meera. She froze. The room seemed to shrink around her, the silence pressing in from all sides. "Yekayahai," she whispered. Her heart was no longer just beating fast. It was racing, pounding against her chest as if trying to break free. She looked closer. The handwriting was familiar, but not in the way she expected. It wasn't her husband's. This was different. Softer. Careful. As if each word had been written with hesitation and feeling. Her fingers tightened slightly around the letters. A strange mix of curiosity and fear washed over her. "Khan," she murmured. The question lingered in the air, unanswered. But something deep inside her already knew. Or at least remembered. Her breath grew uneven as she slowly untied the ribbon. The knot came loose with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting. The pages shifted slightly in her hands. And for a brief moment, time didn't feel like it was moving forward anymore. It felt like it was about to go back. Her fingers lingered on the first letter longer than necessary, as if touching it alone might reveal everything without forcing her to read what was written inside. The paper felt fragile, almost alive, carrying years of silence within its folds. Meera finally unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the edges. "Meera, I don't know if I'll ever give you this, but I need to write it somewhere." Her breath caught. The handwriting was steady, but there was something hesitant about it, like each word had been written after a long pause. She read on, her eyes moving slower with every line. "I see you every morning from across the gate. You always pause for a second before stepping out, as if you're thinking about something you never say out loud." Meera's grip tightened slightly. That small pause, she had never noticed it herself. "Sometimes I want to ask you what you're thinking, but I don't. I tell myself it's not my place." A strange warmth, mixed with unease, spread through her chest. She flipped to the next page, her hands no longer as steady as before. Each letter was the same. Unsent. Unspoken. But full of details no one should have noticed unless they were truly paying attention. The way she watered the plants in the evening. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was lost in thought. The quiet sadness in her eyes on days when she smiled a little less. Yesab iskes patatha, she whispered. Her mind began to search through old memories, pulling out faces she hadn't thought about in years. And slowly, one name surfaced, clearer than the rest. Arif, the boy next door. Quiet, reserved, always around but never too close. The one who used to fix small things without being asked. The one who would greet her with a simple nod instead of unnecessary conversation. The one who disappeared. She sat down on the old wooden chair, the letters spread across her lap now. The room around her seemed to fade, replaced by fragments of a past she hadn't revisited in decades. Arif, she said softly, testing the name on her lips. It felt familiar. Too familiar. She picked up another letter, this one slightly more worn than the others. Meera. Today I heard you laughing, properly laughing. It's rare, but when you do, it changes everything around you. I wish you knew how much light you carry without even realizing it. Her eyes filled, but she didn't blink the tears away this time. When was the last time someone had noticed her like that? Not what she did. Not what she was supposed to be. But who she was in the smallest, most unnoticed moments. Her chest tightened. I stayed where I wasn't even seen, she whispered. She kept reading. Letter after letter unfolded a story she had never known existed. A quiet love that had grown in the background of her life, never demanding attention, never asking for anything in return. I wanted to tell you once, I really did, but then I heard about your marriage, and I thought maybe this is how it's meant to be. Her eyes paused on that line. Marriage. Her marriage. She felt something shift inside her. All those years, she had believed she was building something real, something mutual. And yet, here was proof that somewhere along the way, she had stopped being seen, even by the person she chose. Another letter slipped from the stack, falling onto the floor. Meera bent down to pick it up, her movements slower now, more deliberate. This one felt different. The paper was newer. Not as worn. Her heart began to pound again. No, she murmured, almost instinctively. She unfolded it carefully. Meera, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to come back. Her breath hitched. Come back. She read faster now, her eyes scanning the words as if afraid they might disappear. I never stopped thinking about you, not in a way that asks for anything, just in a way that hopes you're okay. Her hands began to tremble. I moved back recently, 2 streets away. I pass by this house sometimes. I know you don't live here anymore, but a part of me still looks at the windows, wondering if one day. She stopped. Her heart was racing so fast, it almost drowned out the silence around her. The date. Her eyes rushed to the bottom of the page. 3 weeks ago. Yeb hi kahai, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the ground beneath her was no longer steady. 3 weeks. Not years. Not decades. Now. He was here now. She looked around the room again, but everything felt different. The dust, the walls, the silence, it all seemed charged with something she hadn't noticed before. As if this house hadn't just been waiting for her, but had been holding onto something, someone. Her mind raced. Wo yahin hai, she said under her breath. 2 streets away. So close. All this time, she had believed that chapter of her life had ended before it even began. That whatever small, unspoken connection had existed back then was nothing more than a passing moment. But this wasn't a moment. This was years of feeling. Years of waiting. Years of choosing silence over disruption. She stood up slowly, the letter still in her hand. Her legs felt weak, but something inside her was pulling her forward. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. Why now? Why after all this time? Why after everything she had just lost? Her thoughts collided, questions overlapping, none of them fully forming. But beneath all that confusion, there was something else. A possibility. Small, fragile, but real. For the first time since her husband walked out, the emptiness inside her shifted, not filled, not healed, but stirred. As if something long buried had been uncovered. She looked down at the letter again, her fingers tracing the ink lightly. I sit by the window every evening. The words echoed in her mind. Waiting. Not demanding. Not expecting. Just waiting. Her throat tightened. Someone was waiting, she whispered. Not for what she could give. Not for what she was supposed to be. But for her. Just her. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of that realization settle inside her. 42 years of being needed. And now this. Being wanted. There was a difference. A quiet but undeniable difference. Her grip on the letter steadied. The fear was still there. The uncertainty. The hesitation that comes with stepping into something unknown, especially at an age where most people believe their paths are already set. But alongside that fear, there was a spark. Something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not hope. Not yet. But the beginning of it. A question forming softly within her. What if this isn't the end of my story? The next evening arrived quietly, almost as if the day itself understood the weight of what was about to happen. Meera stood near the window, the letter still folded neatly in her hand. She had read it more times than she could count, tracing every word, every pause, every feeling hidden between the lines. I sit by the window every evening. The sentence echoed in her mind again. Her eyes shifted toward the street outside. The sky was beginning to turn golden, the kind of soft light that makes everything feel slower, gentler. John yana John, she whispered. Her fingers tightened slightly around the letter. At 69, decisions weren't supposed to feel like this. Life was meant to be settled, predictable, already defined. But here she was, standing on the edge of something completely unknown. Darkis bot kai, she murmured, almost challenging herself. Fear didn't come from danger this time. It came from possibility. From the idea that something new, something real, could still exist for her. She took a deep breath, wrapped her shawl around herself and stepped out of the house. Each step felt deliberate, like she was walking not just through the street, but through years of hesitation, silence, and everything she had left unsaid. The road was familiar, yet different. Every corner seemed to hold a memory, but none of them felt heavy anymore. They just existed. When she reached the street mentioned in the letter, her pace slowed. Her eyes searched quietly. And then, she saw it. A small house. Simple, modest, the paint slightly faded. But the window was open. Her heart began to pound. Yahan hai, she whispered. She stopped across the street, her feet refusing to move any closer. What am I doing? She murmured, a faint nervous smile touching her lips. For a moment, she considered turning back. This was easier. Standing here wondering. Because once she stepped forward, everything would become real. And reality had already hurt her once. But then her eyes drifted back to the letter in her hand. Years of waiting. Without expectation. Without demand. Just quiet presence. She exhaled slowly. Nahe isbar nahe bagangi. And just as she gathered the courage to take a step, the door opened. Meera froze. An old man stepped out. His posture slightly bent with age, his movements slow, but there was something steady about him, something familiar. He turned his head. Their eyes met. Time didn't stop. It simply shifted. Recognition passed between them, silent but undeniable. "Meera," he said softly. Her breath caught. The way he said her name, it carried the same quiet warmth she had felt in every letter. "Arif," she replied, almost in disbelief. A small smile appeared on his face, not surprised, not shocked. Just gentle. "As I thought," he said, taking a few steps closer, "you came back." There was no question in his tone. No pressure. Just a simple acceptance of what was. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to fill the silence. Because this silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything that had never been said. Finally, Arif gestured toward the bench outside his house. "Bathanj?" he asked. Meera nodded. They sat down, a small distance between them, as if respecting the years that had passed. For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Meera looked down at the letter in her hand. "I found these," she said quietly. Arif glanced at it and smiled faintly. "I wondered if you ever would." "You never sent them," she said. "I never thought I should," he replied calmly. She turned toward him, her brows slightly furrowed. "Why?" He looked ahead, his gaze steady. "Because your life was already moving in a direction," he said, "and I didn't want to interrupt something that you had chosen." His words were simple, but they carried a depth that settled heavily and gently inside her. "You chose silence," she said softly. "I chose respect," he corrected, his tone still calm. That answer stayed with her. Respect. Not absence. Not fear. A conscious decision to step back, even when it hurt. Meera looked away, her eyes distant now. "I stayed somewhere, where I slowly disappeared," she said. Arif didn't respond immediately. He just listened. And somehow that felt new. "I kept thinking, maybe this is how life is supposed to be," she continued, her voice steady but softer now, adjusting, compromising, staying quiet. She paused. "But I never realized I had stopped being seen." The words hung in the air. Not heavy. Just honest. Arif nodded slightly. "Some people don't notice what they have," he said quietly, "and some people notice, even what they do." Meera looked at him again. There was no bitterness in his face. No regret. Just a calm acceptance of everything that had been, and everything that hadn't. "You waited," she said, almost as a statement. "I lived," he replied gently. Waiting was just a part of it. That answer surprised her. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with sacrifice. It was balanced, healthy, real. The evening light began to fade slowly, casting soft shadows around them. For the first time in a long time, Meera felt something shift inside her. Not a sudden happiness. Not a complete healing. But a quiet easing. As if the weight she had been carrying had finally found a place to rest. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. Arif smiled slightly. "Neither do I." They both laughed softly. And that laughter felt different. It wasn't forced. It wasn't meant to fill a gap. It simply happened. Days turned into weeks. Meera didn't rush anything. Neither did Arif. There were no promises made. No labels given. Just small, consistent moments. Morning greetings. Evening conversations. Shared tea. Comfortable silences. And slowly, the house that once felt empty began to feel alive again. Not because someone had filled the space, but because she had. One morning, as she stood outside watering the jasmine plant, she paused. The same pause she used to take years ago. But this time, it felt different. She smiled. "At 69, I thought everything was over," she said softly. Arif, standing nearby, looked at her. Maybe, he replied, it was just the part that wasn't meant for you. She let those words settle. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she had lost something. She felt like she had finally found something. Not just in him, but in herself. Her voice, her presence, her worth. And as the sunlight touched her face, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to escape but to feel. Fully, peacefully, present. Because life hadn't ended when she was left behind. It had simply waited for her to begin again. And this time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. Moral. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is actually redirection. Life doesn't end when something breaks. It begins when you finally see your own worth. It's never too late to be valued, never too late to be seen, and never too late to start again where your heart truly belongs. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created for emotional and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental. The narrative explores themes of loss, loneliness, and rediscovery, and is not intended to represent or judge real-life relationships or choices.